What is a 601 waiver and how can it help me enter the United States or stay here? Hi, I'm Jim Hacking, immigration attorney here in St. Louis, Missouri. A lot of people have a reason that they might not be admissible into the United States. It can be a criminal matter or some other legal bar that prevents them from staying in the U.S. or from adjusting status or makes them inadmissible, which means they're not supposed to be admitted into the United States. One of the ways that we can overcome this is through a 601 waiver. A 601 waiver is a waiver of grounds of inadmissibility, and what it asks for is, can the applicant show an extreme hardship on a U.S. citizen qualifying relative, like a spouse? So the way it works is the U.S. Immigration Service isn't concerned so much about any hardship that would befall the immigrant themselves. It's about whether or not the qualifying relative, a parent or a spouse, would suffer what's called extreme hardship by having this person not given the waiver and forced to leave the United States or not admitted into the United States. So typically where we see this is where a U.S. citizen has a spouse who's inadmissible, and the waiver is based on what would happen to the spouse. So if you can show that they would show an extreme hardship, and that's more than just the hardship of having a spouse who lives in another country, or that you, the U.S. citizen, would have to go live in the other country, because that is part and parcel of every deportation. You're going to have to show an extreme hardship. That is, that there's a hardship that is more serious than the typical deportation hardship result. So you really need to focus on what's going to happen to the citizen and not so much on what's going to happen to the immigrant. And so the way you do this is you demonstrate that for this particular U.S. citizen, they can't go to the other country. They can't move. There's medical reasons or physical reasons or other reasons that would make it very difficult for this U.S. citizen to have to go leave the United States. You can't just be saying things like, oh, it would be hard, it would be sad, it would be expensive to have the person deported. You're going to have to show that it would really be an exceptional, not exceptional, but an extreme hardship on the U.S. citizen. And so the one thing to keep in mind is that you can have what are called aggravating factors and mitigating factors. So with aggravating factors, you have to look at what are the circumstances surrounding the inadmissibility. Why is the person inadmissible? If it's a crime and it was a particularly harsh or brutal crime, that's going to be an aggravating factor and make it less likely that the person is going to be granted the waiver. The mitigating factors are things like, if it was a crime, that the person has gone through a rehabilitation program, that they've made efforts to be a part of their community, and that they are basically a good person. So the thing to keep in mind with a 601 waiver is that the immigration officer has a lot of discretion. So there's no real guarantee that a waiver is going to be given. It's in the discretion of the officer, and just because you've made some claim to extreme hardship doesn't mean you're going to get it. When we're putting these cases together, one of the things to keep in mind is that it's not so much the quantity of evidence of extreme hardship, it's also the quality. So you do want to have a fair amount of evidence of the hardship, but you also want to have evidence that's really credible and competent. So if you can get a doctor to explain that this U.S. citizen would suffer extreme hardship or something along those lines, that's going to make it much more credible than if it's just the applicant and his or her spouse saying that they're going to have an extreme hardship. So you want to have a lot of supporting evidence. You can show conditions in the home country. You can show, like I said, expert testimony from people who can say that this would be a hardship. And so you really want to do as much as you can to demonstrate that hardship, because if the officer feels like they're on the fence or you haven't convinced them, the extreme hardship 601 waiver is going to get denied. If you have any questions about waivers, about grounds of inadmissibility, or obtaining adjustment of status in the United States, give us a call, 314-961-8200, or you can shoot me an email, jim@hackinglawpractice.com. Thanks.